I might not be a forest expert, but I have a chilling story to share. It's about my cousin, who works as a forest ranger in the Montana-Wyoming area, and a strange find we made deep in the woods. This isn't just a story about nature, it's about the mysteries hiding within it, mysteries that can send chills down your spine. My cousin, a trained hydrologist, often ventured into the quiet parts of the forest to test streams and snow runoff for contaminants. Her work was serious, but she loved every minute of it. The peace and solitude of the wilderness were like a balm for her soul. When she invited me to join her on one of her expeditions, I felt a thrill of excitement. The thought of being far from the noise of the city was amazing. I had grown up camping with my family, so I knew a bit about the outdoors, but this trip promised to be something special. After gathering our supplies, we packed everything into saddlebags for a 2-night camping trip. My cousin was tough as nails and had done this many times, so sleeping in the wild didn't faze her at all. Or her, it was just another part of the jobs. But I couldn't shake a feeling of unease. We would be far from help, just the two of us surrounded by miles of dense forest. The isolation felt daunting, even though I had camped many times before. As we set off, the first day was nothing short of magical. The scenery took my breath away. The mountains loomed majestically over us, and the trees stood tall like sentinels guarding the land. Their trunks were thick, their leaves forming a vibrant green canopy above. The air was fresh and pure, filling my lungs with each deep breath I took. It felt like I was breathing in life itself. The tranquility of the wilderness was a stark contrast to the hustle and bustle of city life. I fell in love with this area instantly, wishing I could explore it more often. Yet, the first day was all about business. We hiked through the forest, collecting samples and recording data. My cousin showed me the ropes, teaching me how to spot the right spots for water collection. We spent the morning walking back and forth along the trails, backtracking multiple times to ensure we gathered everything she needed. The work required a lot of focus, but I didn't mind. I felt like I was part of something important, helping to keep our environment safe. As we hiked, my cousin explained her work. "I test the streams and snow runoff for contaminants," she said, her eyes shining with passion. "It's essential to make sure the water stays clean and safe for the wildlife and anyone who might use it." She spoke with such dedication that I couldn't help but admire her commitment to the environment. After finishing our morning tasks, we took a break at a beautiful lookout point. The view was breathtaking. We sat in silence for a moment, soaking in the beauty around us. The sound of a distant waterfall filled the air, and birds chirped cheerfully as they flitted from tree to tree. I realized how lucky I was to be there, far away from the noise of everyday life. My cousin pulled out a small snack pack, and we shared some trail mix, laughing as we enjoyed the moment. As the sun began to set, we made our way back to camp, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink, guiding us home. It felt surreal, almost like being in a movie, far beyond the reach of people, cars, and civilization. Some of the trails we walked were so narrow that I questioned whether they were even meant for humans. My cousin knew the area well and expertly navigated a network of old game trails, leading us up the side of the mountain. Each step brought new discoveries, a unique rock formation here, a patch of wildflowers there. When we finally settled into camp, we prepared a splendid dinner of sandwiches, Cheetos, and pasta salad that we had kept cool in a small cooler. Everything tasted amazing after a long day of hiking. As we ate, my cousin shared more about the area. "You know," she said, "very few people come up here. It's quiet most of the time. But sometimes, I find evidence of people who have been here, like old shell casings." She looked thoughtful for a moment. "Some are rusted, while others are shiny and new. It's odd to find them in such remote places. That is strange, I replied, my curiosity piqued. Do you think they're from hunters? Maybe, she said with a shrug. But it still feels a bit eerie. I don't usually let it bother me, though. After dinner, she mentioned that tomorrow would be fun. We'll pack up camp and then head to an old spot I want to show you. I think you'll really dig it, she said, her excitement evident. With that, we turned in for the night. I lay in my sleeping bag, visions of what might be in store for me tomorrow swirling in my mind. The sounds of the forest wrapped around me like a soft blanket, the rustling leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the gentle breeze. The next day arrived, bright and crisp. My cousin turned to me with a mischievous glint in her eye. Are you ready for the adventure? She asked, her excitement contagious. I nodded eagerly, feeling the thrill of the unknown. After finishing our morning chores, my cousin did something I had never seen her do before. She grabbed a shoulder pack, a single sling setup filled with unique equipment, a rope, a flashlight, a first aid kit, a big knife, and a little black pistol. It's a 9mm Beretta, she said, her tone serious. I take it everywhere in the wild with me. I felt a surge of apprehension at the sight of the gun. Is it really necessary? I asked, trying to hide my concern. She nodded. You never know what you might encounter out here. I've had a few close calls with bears and other wild animals. It's better to be prepared. Trusting my cousin, I took a deep breath and tried to calm my nerves. She had been in the woods many times, and if she felt it was necessary, there must be a good reason. With that, she led us off in a direction we hadn't explored yet, down into a ravine that further led into a gulch. The area felt almost surreal, like something out of a fantasy novel. The towering trees created a natural cathedral, with sunlight streaming through the leaves, casting playful shadows on the ground. I could hear the sound of water trickling nearby, a peaceful melody in the background. As we hiked deeper into the wilderness, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig made my heart race. My cousin assured me it was just the forest coming to life, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were entering a world where anything could happen. At the beginning of this journey, my cousin had brought along some horses to help us reach the more distant locations she needed to test water. I wasn't much of a rider, so my cousin kindly offered to let me ride behind her on her best horse. As we crossed the mountain face, the thrill of being on horseback added another layer of excitement to the adventure. The wind whipped through my hair, and I felt a sense of freedom as we rode deeper into the wilderness. After a while, we reached a clearing surrounded by towering pines. This is one of my favorite spots, my cousin said, smiling. The water here is crystal clear and perfect for testing. We dismounted and set to work, collecting samples from the stream that sparkled in the sunlight. I watched as my cousin carefully dipped her containers into the cool water, explaining what she was doing at every step. It's important to check for pollutants, she said. Even a small change can affect the wildlife. As we worked, I couldn't help but feel a sense of connection to the land. I marveled at the beauty of our surroundings, the vibrant wildflowers blooming at our feet, the distant sound of a waterfall cascading down the rocks, the birds singing their sweet songs. Everything felt alive. Once we finished collecting samples, we took a break, sitting on a fallen log beside the stream. The sound of the water rushing by was soothing, and I closed my eyes, soaking in the moment. My cousin pulled out some snacks, and we shared a quiet meal, talking about our lives back in the city. You know, she said, the city can be so overwhelming. It's nice to escape to places like this where everything slows down. I nodded, fully agreeing. I can see why you love it here. It's beautiful and peaceful. After our break, my cousin said, "Let's explore a bit more. I want to show you something cool." With that, we set off again, venturing deeper into the forest. As we walked, I noticed how the light changed. The trees grew denser, casting eerie shadows on the ground. The air felt cooler, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Suddenly, my cousin stopped, her expression changing. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I strained to listen, my heart pounding. There it was, a faint rustling sound coming from the bushes nearby. My mind raced with possibilities. "What do you think it is?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not sure," she replied, her eyes scanning the area. "It could be a deer or something, but I want to be cautious." We stood still, holding our breath, waiting for whatever it was to reveal itself. Just then, the rustling grew louder, and my cousin reached for her pistol. "Stay close to me," she said firmly. I felt a mix of fear and adrenaline as we waited. The bushes parted, and out came a small, scruffy dog. It looked lost and dirty, its tail wagging cautiously. Relief washed over me, but my cousin remained tense. "Where did you come from?" she asked, kneeling down to the dog's level. The little creature approached her cautiously, sniffing the ground. My cousin checked its collar and found a tag. "It belongs to someone nearby," she said, standing up. "We should try to find its owner." We spent the next hour searching the area, calling out for the dog's owner. As we wandered, the feeling of being watched returned, creeping back into my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The forest felt too quiet, too still. As dusk began to fall, we finally spotted a cabin nestled among the trees. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and light flickered from the windows. My cousin knocked on the door, and an elderly man answered, looking surprised to see us. "I think we found your dog," my cousin said, holding up the little creature. The man's face broke into a grin. "Charlie, I thought I lost you." He reached down and scooped the dog into his arms, giving it a warm embrace. After a brief conversation, we learned the man lived alone in the woods, tending to his garden and enjoying the peace of nature. We chatted for a bit, and he told us stories about the area, tales of wild animals, strange happenings, and his love for the forest. But as the sun dipped lower in the sky, a feeling of urgency pulled at me. I glanced at my cousin, who seemed lost in conversation. Finally, I tugged on her arm. "Maybe we should get going soon. It's getting dark." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You're right. We need to head back to camp before nightfall." We said our goodbyes and started our trek back. As the shadows grew longer, I felt the weight of the forest pressing in around us. The path felt different, now more foreboding. Every snap of a twig made my heart race, and the cool night air sent shivers down my spine. Just as we were nearing our camp, we heard a noise, a low growl coming from the bushes. My cousin froze, her hand instinctively moving to her pistol. "What was that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Stay close," she instructed, scanning the darkness. The growling continued, echoing through the trees, sending chills down my spine. We moved slowly, carefully. Suddenly, a pair of glowing eyes appeared in the shadows, watching us. Panic surged through me. My cousin raised her gun, ready for whatever might come our way. But then, to our relief, a large deer stepped out into the clearing, its eyes reflecting the dim light of the moon. It looked at us curiously before bounding off into the night. We both exhaled in relief, laughing nervously at our own fear. Once we reached our camp, we quickly set up for the night. the thrill of the day's adventure still buzzing in the air. We settled into our sleeping bags, the sounds of the forest lulling us into a sense of calm. But as I lay there, I couldn't shake the feeling that the woods were alive, holding secrets just out of reach. In the days that followed, my cousin and I continued our exploration of the forest. We faced challenges, wild weather, tricky trails, and even more odd encounters with wildlife. But through it all, we grew closer, forming a bond built on shared experiences and a love for the natural world. As we prepared to head back home after our last day in the wilderness, I felt a bittersweet tug in my heart. I had come to love this place, the beauty, the tranquility, and even the sense of mystery it held. I knew I would carry these memories with me, a reminder of the adventures we shared and the hidden secrets of the forest. And though we left, I promised myself I would return. The call of the wild would always draw me back, beckoning me to explore the unknown and uncover the stories waiting to be told in the shadows of the trees. When we reached a secluded fold in the land, we dismounted and tied our horses in a picturesque clearing. My cousin instructed me to follow a narrow wildlife path while she handed me our rechargeable radio. "Stay alert," she said, her tone serious but encouraging. The little device could be wound up for power and could double as a lantern if needed. I felt a thrill of anticipation as I understood we were venturing into a deeper, more isolated part of the wilderness. As I ventured down the path, the trees closed in around me, and I scanned the area carefully. Then, I stumbled upon something utterly out of place in the middle of the wild, a large coil of wire sticking out of the ground. It looked similar to the 10 or 12 gauge wiring used in houses. I stopped, dumbfounded. What on earth is this doing here? I wondered. Then it hit me, this must be what my cousin wanted to show me, the weird and creepy thing she had mentioned. I felt a mix of uncertainty and disappointment, expecting something much bigger and scarier. I reached down and grabbed the wire, but to my surprise, it wouldn't budge. It was so firmly embedded in the ground that it didn't give me an inch. Curiosity sparked within me, and I began to dig into the soil a bit. As I pulled back the dirt, I discovered that the wire entered a tube, protecting it from rocks and other things that could damage it. In that moment, I realized that this wire actually led somewhere. But where could it possibly go? I had no idea. "What do you think?" my cousin asked as she approached me. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Really weird," I replied, still staring at the wire. "Do you have any idea where it goes?" "Nope," she said, shaking her head. "Some of the other rangers told me I'd find this out here, but I didn't think much of it until I actually saw it. It's got to be some kind of hoax, right?" I suggested. "Maybe a prank from when crews were running power lines through here?" My cousin nodded, then shrugged. "Could be, but it's still strange." Then she told me a story. "A few years ago, I found this cable and followed it. It wound its way through the underbrush, strung across tree limbs, snaking around rocks. Eventually, it led to an outlet mounted on the side of a desk." I raised my eyebrows in disbelief. "A desk? In the middle of nowhere?" "Yes." The desk looked just like the ones from school, totally out of place. It stood alone in the wilderness. No chair, no building, just a desk with a live outlet. Confused and curious, I listened as my cousin described her first encounter with the desk. When I found it, I plugged in my radio, and to my shock, it lit up and began blaring static. We were miles from civilization, and somehow we found a live outlet. "Wait, so you're telling me there was power there? In the middle of the woods?" I asked, still trying to wrap my head around the story. "Exactly. The wire was being fed from somewhere, an unknown source." Her eyes shone with excitement as she recounted her discovery. "I really regret not taking a picture of it," she added. "I thought it was so bizarre that no one would believe me if I did. So, I planned a hike with some of the other rangers to show them. Did they believe you?" "They thought I was crazy," she laughed. "When I showed them the pictures, they couldn't believe it, and they planned their own hike to check it out." "Did they ever find it?" My cousin shook her head. "Nope. By the time they got there, it had vanished. No desk, no outlet, just a patch of dirt." That unnerved me a bit. If something like that could disappear, what else might be lurking in the woods? I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a world filled with secrets and unknowns. We set off toward the desk, navigating through the dense underbrush and tangled roots. As we moved, the air felt charged with an electric energy. I could sense that something unusual awaited us. Every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig seemed amplified in the silence of the forest. I tried to shake off my unease, convincing myself that it was all part of the adventure. After hiking for what felt like an eternity, we finally reached the location where my cousin remembered finding the desk. As we pushed through the underbrush, I squinted at the ground, searching for any sign of the mysterious desk. I suddenly noticed a small clearing up ahead. There it was, a lonely desk standing amidst the trees, just as my cousin had described. It looked like it had been abandoned for years, weathered and worn, with faded paint peeling off the surface. My heart raced with excitement as we approached. "Wow, you weren't kidding," I exclaimed, unable to contain my amazement. "It's really here." "Yeah, it's incredible, right?" she replied, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I inspected the desk closely. It was an odd sight, as if someone had just left it there in the middle of nowhere. The desk was large and rectangular, with a smooth top and a couple of drawers that were slightly ajar. I couldn't believe we had found it. "Let's check it out," my cousin said, pulling out the radio. "Maybe we can see if it still works." She plugged it into the outlet on the side of the desk. To our shock, it lit up and started blasting static, crackling through the air. I jumped back, both thrilled and startled. It was surreal to see a working outlet in such an isolated place. "This is insane," I shouted, my heart racing with excitement. As we stood there, the strange energy in the air felt palpable. I turned my gaze back to the desk, and something caught my eye, a set of words crudely carved into the wooden surface. "Go away for good." I shivered at the sight. "What does that mean?" I asked, glancing nervously at my cousin. Her face paled as she looked at the message, and she shook her head slowly. "I've never seen that before. It wasn't here when I checked 3 months ago. There's never been anyone around in my years with the Forest Service." A chill ran down my spine as I processed what she was saying. The message felt ominous, and I suddenly felt as if we were intruding on something we shouldn't have found. We stood in silence for a moment, listening to the woods around us. But nothing stirred. The forest was eerily quiet, and the air felt thick with an unsettling tension. My cousin reached for her radio and radioed her office to let them know we were done for the day. I could tell she was feeling the weight of the atmosphere, and I couldn't shake my growing unease. "Maybe we should head back?" I suggested tentatively, glancing around. "Yeah, let's go," she replied, her voice tight. We hurriedly packed up and started to make our way back down the mountain. The sense of urgency in our steps heightened as the shadows began to lengthen around us. Once we reached our horses, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. We loaded up our gear and began the ride back to civilization. Along the way, we passed a few campers and hikers who waved and smiled as we rode past. But I couldn't shake the image of that desk with its sinister message carved into the wood. As we rode in silence, I could see my cousin was deep in thought. I was sure she felt it too, the weight of something unsettling hanging in the air. What had we uncovered out there in the woods? Once we returned to our base camp, my cousin and I exchanged glances, and without saying a word, we understood. Neither of us wanted to dwell on what we had found. The desk, the wire, and that eerie message felt like secrets we weren't meant to uncover. From that day on, we never spoke of it again. She moved on to other areas in the state, continuing her work in the Forest Service, but I knew that desk still sat there, mysteriously powered and waiting. To this day, I wonder about the desk in the woods. I've shared this story with friends and family, but most just laugh it off as a tall tale. But I know the truth. That strange desk, with its live outlet and haunting message, holds a mystery that remains unsolved. And that, dear listeners, is the end of today's tale. A lone desk, a live outlet, and a wilderness filled with secrets we may never understand. Remember, when you venture into the heart of the wild, be mindful of what you might uncover. Not everything is as it seems in the shadowed woods, and some mysteries are better left undisturbed. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.